as always, we're going to go ahead and start our code at the beginning of the main function. And if we look at that, that is going to be on line 18. So our function name is called main, and our type of the function is called int. No variable name, the value is unknown, and the size of the function is going to be 4 because it's an int. And then right on line 18, we're going to enter a new scope. And that is going to lead to us making the very next thing we're going to do is make a new variable named Joe. So I'm going to call this out specially. The type of our variable is of type student. So with structs, they don't really have direct values. So we're going to put an arrow here. And the size of the struct is a little tricky. But the best way to do a size of a struct is actually right in your memory table, you get to list out all the members. So I like to make a quick little call out that says car. I'm going to shorthand unsigned int to be uint. And I'll draw a vertical line to indicate that they're part of the same thing. Similarly, I'm going to go ahead and draw a vertical line here and list out all the variable member names that belong here. First initial, last initial, uint is going to be age, and then num classes. So now that we have this, and while Joe doesn't have a value, all of these do have values. But remember, we just made Joe. So the value of all of these types, all of these members is actually a question mark. And luckily, because we know the types of all of these members, we actually know the size. So first initials of size 1, last initials of size 1, ages of size 4, and so is num classes. And the size of the student variable is actually just the sum of all of these sizes. So the size of all of these added together is going to be 10. Great. So Joe has a size of 10, and Joe has 4 members, first initial, last initial, age, num classes, that are all set to question marks. Great. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but with Jane. So if we were to go ahead and do that really quickly, we're going to make a variable of type Jane. Again, Jane actually has no values, but Jane is composed of a bunch of values. So we're going to put question marks here for all their values. And the size of Jane, because the size of student is never going to change, is going to be 10, 1, 1, 4, 4. Great. So now we have 2 variables, Joe and Jane. They both have 4 members of different types, and the total size of each of them is 10. And now the next value says, find the Joe variable, and then specifically go to the first initial member and change its value to be the character of J. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The next one says, do the same thing with the last initial, S. Fantastic. Now set Joe.age to be 20. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now set Joe.numClasses equal to 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. So did you notice how the dot operator is really just finding the variable first in my memory table, and the dot allows me to access anything that is part of the vertical line of that type. Now, the reason I can't add middle initial is because I don't have a middle initial type that's part of my student type. How did I know what things to list out here and what these were? Well, I went ahead to my definition of the struct when I defined it at the very top of my file, and everything over there is going to be part of my student type. So I'm basically just going to copy and paste directly from my definition on the code into my memory table. And now I'll go back to doing a similar thing for Jane. So Jane is going to ask me, Jane.first initial is going to be a capital J. Jane.last initial is going to be a capital Y. Jane.age is going to be set to 25. And Jane.numClasses is going to be set to 7. So notice these are really just like normal variables. The only difference is I've just grouped them all together. And secondarily, for readability purposes, it's really convenient that it's named first initial for all of the members. And it's really convenient that I can actually access Jane.firstInitial. So just by reading the variable name, I can know which variable's first initial I'm accessing instead of naming it Jane underscore first initial just to make a brand new variable. The other nice part we're just about to explore. So now that I finished line 30, I'm going to go on to line 32. Line 32 is going to go ahead and make a new variable of type int named myAge. This has the value of 25 and a size of 4 because it's an integer. Now, on line 33, plus equals 1 is saying go to my memory table, find my age, and increase its value by 1. So effectively what I'm going to be doing is changing this value to be 1 more than this, which is 26. Now similarly, line 35 says go to the age member of Joe and increase the age member of Joe by, so go to Joe, go to the age member of Joe, and increase the value of the age number of Joe by 1. So this is going to change to 21. And now, on line 37, I'm finally going to be going into a new function. So first of all, let's make a denotation for the new function. I'll use a new color to be slightly more clear. So the function name is going to be called printStudent. The function is a void type, so that means it has no variable name and no value and no size. Now, as soon as I go to the definition of my printStudent function, I notice that I have a variable over there. So the variable I have over there is of type student. So let's go ahead and make our student type. So now that I have a student type over here, let's do the next thing, which is I need to name my variable. The name of my variable is called val. Again, the struct itself has no value, so my student type has no value. It does have a size of 10. And the members it's going to have are the following. It has the following members, but the value of these members is going to be filled in from whatever variable I passed in. So if I pass in the variable Joe, then my val first initial will be the same as Joe first initial. So in this case, J. Similarly, last initial will be the same as Joe dot last initial. So in this case, S. And now age will be the same as Joe dot first initial, which is 21. And num classes will be the same as Joe dot num classes, which is 3. And of course, the size will be 1, 1, 4, and 4. And now when I go into this function, I'm going to enter a new scope. So let's go ahead and do that on line 11. Now that I've entered a new scope, I'm going to do exactly what these functions tell me to do. So this function says first print out first initial colon with a space, which is what this is doing. Then go ahead and print out the value of the variable val's first initial. So I'm going to go ahead and grab val.firstInitial, which has a value of capital J. And then I'm going to do that with a new line. Then I'm going to go ahead and do something very similar for last initial, and that will cause me to print out last initial, colon, space, the letter capital S. And then once again, I'll do the same with age, where I'll print out age, colon, space, followed by the value of val.age. So the value of the variable val, specifically the member age. So that's going to be print out 21. And then you will lastly do it for number of classes, colon, space, followed by the value of the num classes variable. And then of course, we're going to hit the end of the scope, and then we'll be crossing out everything. So we'll cross out everything up until the return size of the scope. So if you notice now, because we just exited the print student function, we're back to where we were called from, which is the main function, and the next line is line 38. And again, we're going to be entering the print student function. So let me just clear this out really fast to make it easier. Now we'll be entering the print student function again. So when we enter the print student function, we are going to have a type of void, and that means that the variable has no name, no value, and no size. And of course, the print student function takes in one parameter. It takes in the parameter of named val. So let's go ahead and copy this from where we've already been used to copying this from. And our variable will be named val. And of course, again, the variable val itself has no value, and the size of it is 10, but it is composed of many values. And this time, the members of the variable val are going to be filled in from the parameter of whatever was called. So in this case, the parameter of the argument was Jane, so we're going to fill in val from Jane. Jane's first initial is the letter J. The last initial is the letter Y. The age is going to be 25. The number of class is going to be 7. And the size, of course, is 1, 1, 4, and 4. So you might have noticed that when I pass in a student, it actually will fill in the variable student with whatever I have. It's almost the same as when an int is passed in, the value of the argument is exactly whatever is passed into it. Similarly, with a struct, the value of the argument struct, or in this case val, will be whatever is passed into it by the value, by the parameter that the function is called from. So the next thing I'm going to do is on line 11, I'm going to enter new scope. And then lastly, I'll be doing exactly what I did before, which will cause me to print out this section of code. And then once line 15 is over, line 16 is going to tell me to end scope. So I'm going to end scope here, 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 and then here. And then I'll be back to where I was called from, which eventually gave me a return 0. And the return 0 says, cross out everything, set the value of main to be 0, and then cross out everything all the way up until the end of my function. And now my program successfully exited with the return code 0. So we just went through how to use structs in our memory table along with how to pass them into functions. The only thing left for you to figure out how do we return structs as values from functions. So let's make a function called createStudent. This function is going to return the type of student, and it's going to make a custom student for us. So we'll make a variable of type student in here, and we're actually going to fill in using studcin the value for this student. So s dot first initial, and we could make a car C, studcin C, and then do first initial equal to C. Or alternatively, we could skip a step and do s dot last initial directly as a part of studcin. Now remember, s dot first initial is really just going to go into my memory table for the variable s, find this last initial member, and give that to studcin to fill in. So now I'm basically saying, studcin, please fill in the value of this specific member. Just like you aren't allowed to do studcout for the type student because the computer doesn't know how to print out a student, you also aren't allowed to do studcin for a type, for a custom type or a struct that you make. The computer doesn't know how to parse input for the struct that you wrote. So you'll always have to write a custom input object for that. Now, so I'm going to studcout, enter age, enter And now, what do I want this function to return? I want this function to return s, because I have a variable of type s. I have a variable named s of type student that is the student I just created. This function called createStudent should be returning the value of whatever this variable is. Let's try it on a memory table and see if it makes sense. So in order to use this function, I'm going to go ahead and erase this code. I'm going to say Joe is actually equal to whatever the value of createStudent is. So let's go ahead and run through this code really fast first, and then run this code. So first it's going to ask me to enter initial. So TU 48 and 1 class. So if you notice, it's printing out the first initial I entered was T, the last initial I entered was U, the age I entered was 48, and the number of classes was 1. So it does seem to work like we wanted. Just to make sure that we understand, let's work it out on a memory table and really hone in on the details. So let's get started. As always, we're going to start off in the main function. And the main function is going to have the function name main. The type will be an integer. The variable name will be nothing. The value is a question mark so far, and the size is going to be a 4. Well, then I'm going to enter a new scope on line 34. And the very next line is going to ask me to make a type of student. And the variable name is going to be Joe. The value of this type, well, because it's a custom type, it doesn't have a value. We already know from before the student has a size of 10, but let's pretend we didn't for now. And we're going to list out all the members of the student. The student has a car first initial, a car last initial, a uint age, and a uint num classes. Now, this variable doesn't yet have a value, but we can fill out the sizes really quickly. And of course, the size of the overall thing is going to be the sum of all of them combined. Joe specifically does not have a value for all of its members yet, because the value for its members is going to come from the function. So let's go ahead and say what the function is. So we're going to be jumping in to the create student function. The create student function has a return type of student. Now, again, variables don't have names at all. The return types of these students are a car, uint, uint. Now, while the return doesn't have a variable name, it definitely still has member names, so we're going to list those out. And of course, it doesn't have a value, but it does have question marks for all of the members because we haven't yet set them. And the size is a 10 along with a 1, 1, 4, 4. And then the create student function is going to enter a new scope on line 18. Line 19 is then going to go ahead and make a new variable of type student, and it is going to go ahead and name it. It's going to make a new variable of type student named S. S doesn't have a value because it's a student type, and all the values that exist over here are question marks for now because we haven't set them. And the size of S will be 10 along with 1, 1, 4, and 4. Now, line 20 is going to print out enter initial. So we printed out enter initial. We're going to make a variable of type car, name it C. Its value will be a question mark, and the size will be a 1. Then we're going to get a value in from the user input. So in this case, we got a value in. We updated the value of C to be updated to be a letter T. And then we're going to go ahead and go to s.firstInitial in our memory table. So we're going to go to s.firstInitial, which is this value over here. And we're going to set it to be the value of whatever C is. So we're going to update s.firstInitial to be the value of capital T. And then we're going to print out enter initial one more time. And after we print out enter initial, we're going to use user input to set the value of s.lastinitial. So we're using user input to set the value of s.lastinitial. And in this case, the user is going to enter in the letter U. Now, similarly, we're going to print out enter age. And when we enter an age, we're going to get 48 for the s.age variable right over here. Then we're going to enter number of classes. And that is going to give us the value. The user is going to enter the value of 1 for classes. And then we're going to hit return S. So return S means the value that we're returning is going to be whatever the variable S is. So the variable S is, remember, a struct, so it has all of these members. So we're going to go to our return type, and we're slowly going to fill that in from the variable S. So the variable S first fills in first initial to be T, last initial to be U, age to be 48, num classes to be 1, and then because of return, we're going to go ahead and cross out everything. We're going to go ahead and cross out everything up until the function. And now the function, because it has a value of type student, is going to be used in our main code to fill in the value for Joe. So if we jump back to this, Joe is going to have a value in first initial of character T, last initial of character U, age of 48, and num classes of 1. And again, we are filling these in from the value of the function that we just returned from. And then, because we're done with this, we're actually finally done with this function, we're going to exit the scope of this function completely. And now we'd go on just like before doing print student. So I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you to go ahead and finish the memory table for the variable print student. So hopefully this goes a little bit into detail of explaining exactly how structs work. The exact use cases of structs I'm going to leave to you in the lesson. The lesson includes a walkthrough exercise for you to follow along and almost develop the code on your own so you can understand exactly how structs are working a little bit more. Following that, we're going to have a lot of exercises for you to play with as well. Now, I know this is going to be one of the most challenging lessons that you've had to date, but it is vital to use structs to eventually have clean code. Exactly why is coming up soon in the lessons. But until next time, I'll see you again. Goodbye.